Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we are taking a moment to acknowledge the passing of Laker great Mr. Kobe Bryant, and also the families of Altobelli, Mosser, Chester, and Zobayan families, all involved in the tragic Los Angeles helicopter accident that happened not too long ago. There were loss of children, which makes this especially difficult. We'd like to send our prayers and thoughts from here at Manage Your Damn Money and Montgomery Community Media to all the families involved. Malcolm, so when we think about Kobe Bryant, the reason why we're talking about this in part is because you and I both are Laker fans, pretty dedicated Laker fans. When I think about Kobe Bryant, I literally think about my childhood. Kobe debuted in 1996 for the Lakers. I was 9 years old, living in Southern California. It was right at the transition from Vlade Divac, Eddie Jones, Nick Van Axel, all those guys. Names some people be like, oh yeah, I remember those guys.
Swingman.
Right, indeed. And it's transitioned into the Shaq and Kobe era. And that carried on, with their dynasties, 3 championships, then the 2 championships with Pau Gasol and company, all the way into grad school for me at 23. And now we're back with LeBron James, where the Lakers are at prominence. What are some of your thoughts when it comes to Kobe Bryant?
So, kind of to your point, like I feel like I almost grew up with the dude. Granted, he's 10 years roughly our senior, but like from watching just regular TV shows,
Right.
music videos
Yeah.
with Kobe in them, and basketball aside, like
Right.
just pop culturally relevant events where
Right.
you would see him show up. That was a big deal too back then. And then also like the street ball phenomenon, I guess is the word, that existed at the time. So you had the and ones and the Rucker Park phenomenon, where you had folks like Kobe and Carmelo, and I think Kevin Durant was probably like the last class of guys to actually play outside like that. But Kobe came straight from like fresh off the plane from Philly and like dominated one of those games, and like just culturally from, like you said, 9-10 years old on, dude was always around basketball.
Yeah, definitely. It's a pretty shocking loss. I still see the news, and I still see like the stories and his face everywhere. It still doesn't feel real to me. There's like a surrealty to it. I feel like I'm in a different universe where this is some movie, and then it's gonna come up and we'll realize that it wasn't the case. What do you think, Malcolm, that his life and specifically his work meant to millennials in particular?
Well, I think, man, that's a good question. I think a lot of millennials are about the same age as us, slightly older, slightly younger, that are saying the same thing. Like, I've been seeing this dude on TV, I've been going to games, I've been, anywhere you turn around where basketball is concerned, the name Kobe Bryant is as ubiquitous as Michael Jordan or LeBron James.
Right.
Like, regardless of where you fall on the hierarchy of who is better than who, those 3 names are basketball.
Absolutely.
Right. And so when you just think about like the weight of like that impact on the sport, it's like, man, like.
I think about, when you talk about millennials, my friend was telling me a story, and I think this was unrelated before the tragedy took place, but he was talking about his daughter who's 3, and when she like shoots a piece of trash, she would say, Kobe! Which is like, she never saw Kobe play, but to your point about the ubiquity of his name in particular, I've had a lot of conversations with friends. What have your conversations been with friends about, processing all of this?
I haven't really had that many conversations. Like, so when the news broke, I was sitting on the couch with my wife, like watching TV, and she happened to be like in the middle of a group chat conversation with her friends, and somebody like dropped the news headline in the group chat, and she's like, well, this is strange. Like, why are people trying to kill Kobe off?
Right.
And then like it progressively became truer and truer.
Then that news outlets that are reputable began
Right. So
reporting
beyond TMZ, all of a sudden, people who actually are respectable news outlets. Reputable is the nice way to say it. Respectable is my word. But it became realer and realer, and what was interesting is it became quieter and quieter between us in the living room, sitting there like this is real. Right. Like, and then all of a sudden, like, we looked at each other and like, why do we care so much?
Wow.
Like, not that you shouldn't care when there's a loss of life in general, right? Anybody, your family or a person across the street. But just in general, like, I've never met Kobe Bryant before in my life.
Yeah.
Never had a conversation with the guy on the phone or anything like that. But I feel like personally impacted by this one.
Right.
So it's just strange that, like, I haven't completely been able to process what this even really means or why I even feel the way I do toward it.
Yeah. I, on my end, definitely shed several tears. Felt like to your point, I couldn't really put my finger on what it was initially. But I think, at least thus far, only recently removed from it, and today where we sit here today talking about it, I think, there was clearly through my life an impact just through the level of excellence that was there and that you were seeing. And for me, the thing that I've taken away, at least thus far, is that, everyone knows what the Mamba mentality meant for Kobe Bryant in terms of being in the gym at, 6 a.m., getting up 1,000 shots, and what that means for how it translates on the court. I think that means something in terms of everyone else pursuing their own goals with that same level of veracity. And so I'm thinking, for me, like, that's the thing that thus far I'm taking away. Like, okay, you got to do it. And if you want to do it, you got to do it that way with that level of intensity. So, I don't know. It'll be an interesting one. I think our generation, our particular generational cohort, and those who watched those, many Laker games and watched his career, this is going to be a tough one to get through.
I think it's especially tough because there's not anyone or anything necessarily to blame. So when, for example, Michael Jackson or Prince died and the news came out, it was like, oh man, not, Prince, not Michael Jackson.
Right.
And then a few minutes later, it's like he overdosed on drugs. And it's like, okay, I can immediately blame
or rationalize
the drugs or rationalize.
Right.
But in this scenario, like, dude was just commuting, taking his daughter to basketball practice, minding his business.
Right.
So then I think there also becomes the realness of that, right? Like the fact that even in going about your day-to-day, minding your business, being a good, citizen, like all of us have an expiration date at some point.
Right.
And so the realness of that, I think, also is what's been made candidly, right there in your face by this whole.
And I'll close with saying this. For me, at least, the immediate thought that I'm having is there's just a part of me, and I think it's the child part of me, that feels like Kobe's, and everybody in the helicopter is gonna be like, we back, like in the fourth quarter, and it just doesn't feel like the correct final note on the situation. And so you have to, like, realize, like, wow, like, despite his greatness in his particular area of work, and then he did a whole bunch of stuff as a retired player, a retired person.
Was just getting, like, his career as an investor, like, the last 2 or 3 years off the ground.
He was doing his thing as a father. I have 3 little girls myself. And so, all that seemed like, it's just a ...
Yeah.
And it's like, this story can't end this way. So I think it's certainly up to us in the world who are still here in the land of the living to continue to do our work with that Mamba mentality. And with that, I'd remind you, you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money, where we have just got through talking about a little bit about Kobe Bryant, and we realized this week that the show we had written was perfectly paired for Mr. Bryant. He had become somewhat of a advocate, I think, as of late, the last few years, specifically as it pertains to his daughter, Gianna, in playing basketball. He not too long before he went on, he said something to the effect of, there are several WNBA players that could play in the NBA right now. And so Kobe was definitely on the train for...
I had my suspicions that he was talking about his own daughter, by the way.
Possibly. Well, we thought, that being the case, our talk around women in sports leading the way in pay equity would be perfectly paired for this conversation today. Throughout the history of American sports, we've consistently seen its ability to vigorously pursue equality on the field and thus in everyday life, be it the raised fist of Tommy Smith and John Carlos standing on medal podiums at the 1968 Olympics, or Muhammad Ali's refusal to participate in the Vietnam War, or Serena Williams admonishing a U.S. Open umpire. Sports continues to serve as a match lighting the fire for social change in the United States. Much like the moments mentioned above, we are seeing another push, this time by women athletes pushing the edges of what equity means in terms of their compensation for playing sports. On this episode of Manage Your Damn Money, we are exploring how women in sports are leading the way in the fight for greater equity in pay in the workplace. And before we move on into this conversation, Malcolm, it is really important that you and our viewing audience acknowledge my threads. I'm honoring the name in amazing fashion and form. I got the Kobe.
You're talking about your number 8 Kobe jersey?
Yes, indeed I am. Yes, indeed I. Also, if you pan your viewership to the bottom below the desk, I'm also wearing a pair of Kobe's.
Okay.
Not recent ones.
Now, did you just have to take those out of the box, or like for the? Are they in a display case at your house, or do you like?
These I actually wore in the basketball court at LA Fitness countless times.
So you hoop is what you're telling us.
Once upon a time, I could get on the court and not look terrible.
I don't know what that. I mean, that's a wide range. Like I said, and I know you know this terminology.
I'm listening.
When I said, so you hoop, that's a totally different conversation from I can be on the court and take up space. That's a totally different threshold, and you crossed a very wide gulf to get there.
I could do more than take up space.
Okay.
But ain't nobody gonna be like, yo, we gotta get him either. It's like a nice little, you wanna be in the middle.
Okay.
You don't wanna be that dude that's killing everybody, or you can be, but you certainly don't wanna be the dude on the other end of the spectrum where you're like, don't pass him the ball. That's not me.
See, I believe that this is completely off topic, but since you took us there, we're going there. I believe there should be a certain like level of like requirement skill-wise for you to be allowed to wear certain players' shoes on the court to play pickup basketball. So if you show up in Jordans, it should like automatically signify to me that you should be my first pick off the sideline with my new squad coming on the floor. Or if you show up, especially now, if you show up in some Kobe's, it should be you are about to shoot the lights out and I need you on my team. So if you show up in some Dennis Rodmans or some
Starberries,
the Shaq shoes that were sold at Sears, like if you show up in some of those, you're taking up space.
Okay.
Right? It's a safe assumption you're just there to take up space.
Okay. Very good.
That should be the requirement to me.
Very good, very good. Well, that is a nice little scale that you just created there on the fly, sir.
I aim to please.
Hopefully somebody at a LA Fitness somewhere, 24-hour Fitness, will implement that. So really, what inspired the conversation around women in sports leading the way in pay equity, the WNBA just had a new deal. Also, do you remember Serena going at the U.S. Open Empire? I think we talked about this.
100%.
100%. She was getting her butt whooped by Naomi Osaka on that one.
Yes.
She was getting worked.
However, she was getting worked by the referee too.
Yeah, correct.
And in tennis, similar to like an NFL football game, like one specific bad call has the ability to completely shift the momentum and completely shift the outcome of the match.
Right.
So I completely understand and sympathize with her in that moment, and still, when folks talk about it.
And even in the moment, you knew it represented something more than what it was, just what was happening. But as I mentioned, the new WNBA deal will bring big salary increases. This was a January 2020 piece on the Wall Street Journal by Rachel Bachman. The Women's National Basketball Association and the Women's National Basketball Players Association finalized a labor deal Tuesday that was triple cash compensation for top players and boost the average league salary above 6 figures for the first time under the new 8-year collective.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I was like, this is so
like the minimum contract for an NBA player, the 12th man down at the end of the bench.
Who's taking up space?
It's like 800, right? He's taking up space in NBA terms, right? Because still, dog you or me, without any question. But that 12th man at the end of the bench that you can't tell if he's the assistant coach or not, his minimum salary is like $810,000 or something.
Which is wild.
The worst guy on the team. So for us to be talking about the best women's players now seeing six figures for
barely.
The first time ever is like absolutely ridiculous.
It is. And under the new 8-year collective bargaining agreement, the WNBA's top players will be able to earn more than $500,000 a year. The average cash compensation for players will reach nearly $130,000 and result in an increase for players from rookies to veterans. The agreement goes into effect in the 2020 season and is a big victory for players. But at a time when the league has already faced questions about its financial stability, the deal also creates pressure to raise revenues and to help fund the increases. So what was your initial reaction when you saw the news?
It's about time. That was really like so I had two reactions actually simultaneously, believe it or not. So I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it's ever come up on the show or not actually. Okay. But one of my wife's best friends plays in the WNBA.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm very much attuned to some of the goings-ons of like their plights, if you will. Like she plays overseas every summer and all that kind of stuff.
They were sharing rooms.
Amazing to me.
What?
I've never played basketball professionally in my life, and if my boss said we need you and Ben to share a room on this work trip, I'm not going on this work trip. Like, how dare you? So yes, that is. But anyway, so I said all that to say, like, I've attended quite a few WNBA games in person recently, simply because we were invited by my wife's friend. Okay. And so as I'm looking around, like I'm looking at the numbers and like the attendance levels at the Verizon Center here in DC, and I'm like, man, like they're playing the LA Sparks. Right. I can't imagine what the crowd must look like for Connecticut or Phoenix or somebody like that. That's a lesser market with lesser known players. Right. But like, so immediately when I heard the news, I'm like, how are they gonna pay for that? Like, you know, it's great that you're raising the salaries of your players. Right. But then how are you going to pay for that guarantee that you just made to those people on the team that are going to be counting on that money?
There is a bottom line to be taken care of. Players in the WNBA, which completed its 23rd season in 2019, opted out of their previous CBA in 2018 to seek higher pay and better working conditions. News of their CBA came as athletes across women's sports are lobbying for better pay and more investments in their league. Under the new deal, the WNBA maximum salary base will rise to $215,000 a year, up from $117,000. That's wild to me. Even the new maximum would be a fraction of the seven-figure salaries that top women players can earn playing in China, Russia, and Turkey. But WNBA leaders hope the salary bump encourages players to commit to the league rather than spending their off seasons playing overseas. The deal also includes, and this is a big one, a 50-50 revenue sharing model starting with the 2021 season based on league revenue growth. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert said in a conference call that the league will aim to draw more fans and viewers to help make the deal work, and that it will try a variety of things to broaden the revenue base. She added, our owners and our teams are making significant financial commitments under this agreement. So Malcolm, how do we understand the balancing act of gender pay parity, I guess you might say, especially in a situation like this where the WNBA produces far lower revenues than the sibling, the NBA? Like you just outlined the quagmire in the situation. We want women to earn more money. How do we make the product worth that dollar amount?
I think the answer could just be having more top talent on each team. Okay. So the game, for whatever criticisms you want to smack down, it's not as exciting from end to end as the NBA game.
Or so it's said.
Well, when I say exciting, I mean in the audience, as a fan, folks are not standing up on their feet 50% of the time cheering the same way they do at NBA games. Okay. And I think part of like a solution for that could be where, I don't mean necessarily the Warriors team that's got 99 superstars on one team, or used to.
Right.
I'm saying at least 2 players on each team that are offensive superstars in a way that make you go, oh no, like there's a lot of action happening and I don't want to miss anything.
And I'm trying to watch. And to that point, the league, I think there was some, I don't know how many exactly. I think it's like 8 or 12. There's some amount of teams in the WNBA now, and a few years ago it was like more. So they've got condensed down.
They've shut down some markets.
Right. So to your point, maybe it's concentrating the number of players and the talent so that more markets have an opportunity to showcase that talent. It's an interesting thought. So what does a 50-50 revenue share say about the deal and the deal makers?
Well, I think it basically says your interest as the team owner and my interest as the league front office are aligned now.
Right.
You're going to do everything you can possibly do to grow your brand and your footprint, meaning things as simple as, you have a DC team, the Washington Mystics. You are going to have high school camps, for example, that create a pipeline basically for high school girls playing basketball to go to college to then come to the WNBA.
Right.
And that pipeline, the same way it exists in the men's game, creates that excitement again, that creates those multiples of superstars, that create those additional revenue streams that now our interests are aligned because we're in this as a partnership, and I'm not just kind of barking out orders and kind of issuing your marching orders, if you will, from the top.
Right. The thing that I think about actually is, at least from my vantage point, the rise in interest in women's soccer. Now, that also coincides with them being really good. So it kind of, I don't know if there's obviously there's a correlation between interest and being good, because the U.S. men's soccer team sucks and no one cares when they play. So that makes sense. But I was watching some kind of piece on ESPN or something, and they were talking about back in the 90s during the Mia Hamm era of USA soccer for women. They were out at community events, signing autographs, doing real grassroots work to gain interest from essentially young girls and their parents and families. I'm thinking that might also have to be a route, because there has to be some way to generate interest around the personalities as opposed to just the product of what's on the court, period. Because I don't really watch any NBA games.
But in the words of Flavor Flav, you got to pay me, boy. You can't expect I'm going to do all these,
that's true. Extra stuff.
Extra things.
Yeah.
And you also kind of went really fast through the alternative, which is, I can go over to China or Turkey or Israel and play and make 10 times the amount of money I make playing here.
Right.
Why would I forego that to be here signing autographs and, whatever else, unless you're going to pay me the difference?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, I'm a professional athlete who wants to get paid for this small window of time that I'm at peak condition to be able to play.
Right.
Make it worth me sacrificing going and playing overseas to help build your brand here in the States.
It's definitely a tough equation, one that we certainly do not have the answer to. Really quick question before we go to another music break. What does this kind of story have for society at large? What does it mean for us?
Well, so the real thing that jumped out to me, and the reason, as we talked about it, we decided to do the show, was because as I'm scrolling through normal investment, financial news, whatever, news of the WNBA's deal keeps showing up. And it keeps showing up in such a way that it made me realize the effect that it's going to have on the WNBA players is going to be X.
Right.
But the effect that it's going to have on the conversation around pay equity in general is going to be, X and some multiple.
Right.
So it's where the conversation starts, but it's not at all where the conversation stops. Because you had, what's the lady's name? Billie Jean King in the 70s, pounding the table saying, you need to pay me as much as you pay the men who I'm whooping up on the court.
Right.
If the answer is let me play against them to prove to you I'm good enough, then that's the answer. But from then on, the conversation kind of just fell.
Right.
And so I think looking at the women's soccer team and the women's basketball team and the way they're able to start to really make some meaningful noise around this conversation, I think it's kind of bringing it up in a way that you can't quite avoid it anymore the way we have in the past.
Very good, very good. Well, I remind people you can catch Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts as a podcast, on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, And please leave us a review on any of those platforms. Give us a nice 5-star rating that helps more people catch the show. If you have a question or topic you want us to cover, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can always catch us on social media. My handle's @MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
Of course, you can catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where today's conversation at hand in my spiffy Lakers jersey is women in sports leading the way in pay equity. Another article that we pulled for this particular show. The U.S. Open awards men and women equal prize money, but tennis still has a pay gap. This is a September 2019 piece on CNBC.com by Courtney Connolly. At the 2019 U.S. Open, a total of $52.7 million was awarded to players, with large sums going to the singles champs. Bianca Andreescu, a first-time U.S. Open competitor, defeated Serena Williams. Another time, Serena Williams was getting mopped, and I was like, I don't know if she's going to be able to come back from this. This final match on Saturday, Rafael Nadal defeated Daniil Medvedev in the men's final match which was that Sunday. They took home equal prize money for their respective wins. This was $3.85 million each. It hasn't always been this way, though. Though men and women tennis players are awarded equal prize money in today's U.S. Open matches, it wasn't until the legendary tennis champ Billie Jean King threatened to boycott the U.S. Open in 1973 that men and women finally received equal pay for the U.S. Open wins, Malcolm, as you referenced in the earlier segment. Mm-hmm. But the equivalent prize money that men and women receive at the Grand Slam event still puts tennis ahead of other leagues and associations in terms of equality. In the NBA, each player on the championship team received roughly $240,000 this year for their win. That's significantly more than the $11,000 ESPN reports WNBA players receive for winning a championship. That's like a small business bonus, $11,000.
Oh yeah. It's not.
That's like.
It's not.
And after it's taxed,
it's
taxed, like you might go get yourself like a new pair of headphones.
I know some bank employees that bonus better than that.
Man, as a father of girls, I gotta help fix this situation. In soccer, 28 members of the U.S. women's national soccer team filed a lawsuit in March against the U.S. Soccer Federation, or the USSF, for wage discrimination. According to the lawsuit, if the men's and women's teams won each of the 20 non-tournament games they're contractually expected to play, the women's team players would earn a maximum of $99,000, while the men's team players would earn $263,000. That's despite the fact that women's games generating approximately $6.8 million in revenue between 2016 and 2018, compared to the men's games, which generated $49.9 million, Malcolm. So, real quick question for you. Why has tennis led in this area of paying winners of tournaments the same amount of money?
My best guess is that tennis is an international game, and basketball is not. Because there are so many other countries that are so much further ahead than the United States on treating their citizens like they have some sense.
Right, yeah.
That you can't take that nonsense elsewhere.
Right.
So if you look at soccer, for example, you can go play internationally and play soccer and earn, legitimate money as a women's soccer player or a men's soccer player, and their parity is a lot closer.
Okay.
When it comes to the men's and women's U.S. national teams,
right.
that's where the disparity
right.
happens.
Right.
And so outside of the U.S., people have a little more sense already
right.
and are like, this is a problem. We see the problem. All of us at the table acknowledge it's a problem. Let's just fix the problem.
Right.
Whereas in the U.S., things always start with, why don't you tell me why I need to worry about that? That sounds like a woman's issue to me. Since there aren't any women in the room, let's move on to the next order of business. And so you then have to move to, well, we would hire more women and we would pay them more if we could find some good ones.
Right.
We don't know any. To, okay, fine, I guess we have to even. Right. And so the U.S. just has this history of always taking so long to get on the right side of right and dragging their heels, kicking and screaming along the way.
That is totally unrelated to what I'm about to bring up, but there's a Goldman Sachs story about them not taking public companies that don't have at least one diverse board member.
That's so laughable.
With a focus on women.
Just after they announced that you don't have to wear a shirt and tie to work anymore.
Right. It was a really hilarious thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. Goldman Sachs and diversity. It'll probably come up. It's pretty hilarious.
After we got done pillaging the world and causing the 2008 economic crisis,
we need at least one.
Here we come.
We need at least one.
Man, get out of here.
Anyway, I was going to say this about tennis, though. It's interesting. I don't watch men's tennis matches. I can't.
Serena doesn't play against men. If she did, I would watch.
Beyond that point, that's true, but beyond that, the men's matches are entirely too long.
Really?
It's for me. Like, I'm not going to sit there and watch for 4 hours. The women's match, for whatever reason, is shorter because of the number of sets. It's only like best of 3, whereas the men's is best of like 5.
Okay.
And the 5, it just goes on for way too long. The women's is appropriately timed, even if you account for like ties and stuff like that.
I never even noticed that there was that much of a disparity in the time because I do not watch men's tennis. Like, straight up, Serena Williams and Venus Williams brought me to tennis. So there is no men's game as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm watching like Sloane Stephens and Naomi Osaka.
Yeah.
Still 2 women. So there is no men's tennis tournament happening as far as my TV is concerned. So I couldn't even begin to tell you the disparities between the way they play the game.
Anyway, moving on, and I actually reversed the order of an earlier point that I made, but the final story that we have for this show, U.S. women's soccer equal pay fight. What's the latest and what's next? You may have heard about this last year in 2019. This was a November 2019 piece on ESPN by Emily Kaplan. On August 14th, mediation talks broke down between the USSF and the women's soccer team, with the spokesperson for the players saying they eagerly look forward to a jury trial. On August 19th, a district court judge set a trial date for the lawsuit brought against the U.S. soccer organization by members of the women's national team. The trial will begin May 5th, 2020, and will last 4 or 5 days. Then, on November 8th, a judge granted the players a motion to be certified as a class action lawsuit. And the class action lawsuit essentially makes the stakes even greater for those involved. And FIFA's position on the prize money is that it's tied to revenue, which is an interesting argument. Simply, the men's tournament brings in much more than the women's. Some projections of what the tournaments earn in revenue have been made public, but not all the numbers are available. The New York Times reported projections of $6.1 billion for the 2018 men's tournament, and FIFA projected the Women's World Cup would bring in $131 million over the 4-year cycle. This raises the question of whether it's fair to cut prize money proportionately. FIFA has has the funds to close the gap. The organization's cash reserves hit $2.74 billion in 2018. So it's an issue where they have the money to make it equal or more equal than what it is. They're just not doing it yet. Other issues at hand. The U.S. women's national team has also fought for better conditions. The women had lesser accommodations while traveling. As we mentioned, WNBA players sharing rooms, which again I think was ridiculous, and routinely had to play on artificial turf instead of natural grass, which was kinder to the body and your knees and all that kind of stuff. And according to the complaint, between January 1, 2014 and December 31, 2017, the U.S. women's national team played 62 domestic matches, 13 of which were played on artificial surfaces. During the same period, the U.S. men's national team played 49 domestic matches, and only one, which is 2%, was played on artificial surface. So even in that area, like there was a difference in how they were being treated. And since the lawsuit was filed, U.S. Soccer has scheduled all the women's games on natural grass. So that it was like just an oversight they didn't think about.
Well, that's what I was thinking as you were kind of going through that even if they come up short on the pay equity position specifically,
right,
as long as it gets put in writing that the determination is that they will split the prize money based on the sales and the people they're able to bring into the arena, it sets a precedent and opens the gates for the women players to drive their own outcomes in a way that they don't have right now.
Right.
We all know we're living in a social media generation, and we all know that women are better at social media than men are.
Right.
So they have the ability to put butts in the seat, so to speak.
Absolutely.
From a marketing standpoint that they probably haven't tapped into just yet.
Yeah.
But after winning a championship and going on this campaign, I'm sure they ultimately will.
Right.
So even if that gets put into writing as kind of a mandate, that at least opens the door for them to kind of eat what they kill, so to speak, as the term goes.
Right. When I think about this whole argument, I think about Megan Rapinoe, who is like one of the leading scorers during the World Cup, I think last year. What do you think the impact is on society, little girls, et cetera, on seeing, this awesome soccer player score a bunch of goals and then coming out in public on TV and otherwise talking about equal pay and this lawsuit, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, so that was my whole point in like us having the discussion on this, is that it's bigger than sports, right? Like sports is leading the way because it's the thing that we can all rally around. Like if you think about the civil rights movement in the 60s, basketball and football were where black men really dominated and shined in this country in a way that they couldn't in the business world. Right. So you had like Jim Brown, for example, and Bill Russell, for example, who were like prominent big time athletes of their day. Right. Also helping to lead the civil rights movement and coming to the aid of Martin Luther King and others like him, and using their celebrity to help push that agenda. Right. I think that's what we're seeing in the same vein, where you have big-time women's soccer players, women's basketball players, whoever, who are coming out and making the case that it's not just about the sport itself, it's about fair is fair. Right. And so now I'm a 10-year-old girl hearing this from the time I'm 10 years old and aware of it, to when I go to put my resume in to work a job at 22, wherever, coming out of college, it's already been instilled in me that no, I don't have to get paid 70 cents on a dollar because we decided 10 years ago, fair is fair. Right. We're not doing that. Right. And so I think it has the ability to have that kind of a lasting effect because these women are willing to lend their own voice and be a face of that movement in that way.
Are there any immediate impacts, outside of the sports world that you feel this has? Is there a, to use a Reaganomics term, is there any trickle down from I don't know why I'm such a geek for like making that joke. Is there any like trickle down from?
I think that's it. It's the next generation of regular citizens, not the athlete who's spectacular at whatever their craft is and is already going to be all right, so to speak, from like an income and a career perspective. But it's the regular people who will be affected by that movement taking place.
Right. Indeed. Well, I want to remind people you can always catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Please leave us a rating and a review on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch the show. If you have a question or a topic you want to send it to us, send us an email at info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can always catch us on social media. My handle's at MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
At Malcolm on Money.
And that's on Instagram and Twitter. You can catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/ManageYourDamnMoney. Thanks to our partners once again here at Montgomery Community Media for another amazing show. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.